Alright, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and it's time to have some fun today. A lot of hypotheticals, may not exactly happen, but we're going to take a look at how the Washington Commanders can end up with $58 million worth of cap space to enter this 2023 free agency with. That's a lot of money, man. We are currently 18th in cap space. Getting that much would put us third in the NFL in cap space. And of course, with us getting the $58 million worth of cap space from where we currently are, which we're going to talk about after the intro, there's going to be a lot of top cuts. We're going to do a full salary cap analysis, look at a lot of the players that are getting paid the most money. Who should we not cut? Whether it's because of the way they're playing on the field and we shouldn't cut them because they're playing well, or it wouldn't even be worth cutting them this year. Maybe you'd be better off cutting them next year because of the dead cap that would hit you this year. So we're going to do a full Washington Commanders salary cap analysis with the primary goal of figuring out how we can get the $58 million worth of cap space. Already did the calculations, so we're going to run down. I also want to take a look at a lot of the priority cuts. So we're going to have a list of guys that cutting could make sense as far as how much money you would get back. It will be worth the dead cap that may get left over, or you have a situation like Carson Wentz where there is no dead cap and it's all profit. But I also want to take a look at the priority of or how likely some guys are to get cut. Who's the most likely, who's the least likely, and why, and things like that. And then of course there's some guys that are off limits. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get notification immediately. And every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, make sure you pull up every Sunday for the Commanders live stream. Sorry I wasn't able to do it this past Sunday, it was a little busy, but also make sure you stay tuned for all of the content. Like I said, as many ideas as I have, I need to be putting out like 2 to 3 videos a day, and I'm about to start getting the film sessions for draft players, which is going to be channel member exclusive. So make sure y'all stay tuned for all of that, man. I'm really excited. I have so much draft stuff, so much free agency stuff I got to get to y'all. This is the beginning of the free agency stuff. I'm starting with how we get $58 million worth of cap space today, and then eventually we're going to start to look at my dream case free agency wish list on all of the guys I want, all of the top free agents at each position, videos like that. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Without further ado, let's get it. Again, like I said in the intro, today we're looking at how the Commanders can end up with $58 million worth of cap space, which is like the most they could get that would make sense. They could technically get more, but then you would be cutting guys where it's not even worth it. You would be taking on so much dead cap, and you would be creating such a big hole on the team at a certain position that it wouldn't be worth it. Everybody that we're cutting today, you can see an argument for why we would cut them, how much money we would save, and how we could even potentially replace them in the draft or in free agency with another person. But after today, we're going to start to look at a lot of the top free agents. I want to do a video of my preferred free agents at each position group. I want to do like a dream case scenario wish list where we just happen to get everybody that I want, but it has to make sense. It has to be in the realm of $58 million worth of cap space or even less. And then I'm gonna probably do like a most realistic one where like if it's Rivera and not me, who we may actually end up getting in free agency and things like that. So make sure you stay tuned for those videos. But today, as of right now, just to let you know, the Commanders rank 18th in cap space as of today with $7 million. We have the least out of any teams that are in the positive, because once you start with the Jets at 19 with negative $2.6 million worth of cap space, everybody else is in the negatives and they have to do some things to create some space on their books. So they're going to have a lot of cuts and stuff like that. As of right now, we have $7 million, but do not worry. As far as paying Deron Payne and all of those guys, we should have the money for that. And I also want to do a video breaking down the guys who will be unrestricted free agents that we need to bring back and how much I think we should be able to do it for. Like even guys like Cameron Curl that we may need to pay a year in advance because his contract isn't ending this offseason, but we may want to go ahead and get that out the way, along with Cole Holcomb, Montez Sweat, of course Deron Payne, and guys like that. So make sure you stay tuned for that video as well. But today we're focusing on just purely cap space and the guys we need to cut to get to that much. Again, we have $7 million right now, but there's a way we can get the $58 million. Now there's no way possible that we can get to the $115 million that the Chicago Bears have. That's ridiculous. That's as of today. If they would have cut some guys, they could potentially get even more. So that's just absolutely ridiculous in itself. But moving on to the Commanders, the most obvious cut is Carson Wentz. Point blank period. He's going to hit our cap space for $26 million worth of a cap hit in this 2023 upcoming season. But if we cut him, 0 did cap, and that's pre-June 1st. Of course, after June 1st, things get a little bit interesting, and that's how you can save money. Because, like, for example, Jonathan Allen, we're not cutting him for any reason at all. But if we were, for some completely idiotic reason, you cut him pre-June 1st, he's $18 million worth of dead cap. You cut him after June 1st, he's only $4 million worth of dead cap. So usually cutting a guy after June 1st saves you a lot of money. Not all of the time, but usually. Carson Wentz, you cut him today, you get an additional $26 million worth of cap space, which takes us up to $33 million. And that's easily enough to pay Daron Payne, maybe even pay Cameron Curl and Cole Holcomb long term. And that's before we do any further cuts. So that's really good to know. And just going down the list of the guys that are most expensive, you also have Chase Roulier, whereas right now doesn't necessarily make sense to cut him, but you could. He's gonna hit us for around $12.4 million worth of cap space this season. If you cut him pre-June 1st, you're only saving $4 million because he's still gonna be an $8 million dead cap. But if you cut him after June 1st, you save $8 million and he'll only be a $4 million dead cap. But we're just gonna assume everybody is cut pre-June 1st. That way you have the money to make moves in free agency to bring in a potential replacement or address other parts of the team. So Chase Roulier, you cut him, you could potentially save $4 million. Next up, you have Kendall Fuller. And I think he ends up staying, especially with the pick sixes he got this year. And then you never know. I think we probably do end up going corner in the first round of this upcoming draft. It's between corner or offensive lineman, honestly. I really like Christian Gonzalez. I really like Joey Porter. Even as a Georgia Bulldog fan, I don't think Kelee Ringo at 16 is worth it. Too many risks. Too much inconsistency, too many technique issues and concentration issues and things like that. Too many weaknesses to his game, too raw. But either way, I can see us just going offensive lineman to make sure that Sam Howell has everything he needs. And Rivera and Martin Mayhew has already been reported that their top offseason priority is offensive line. And so they may address that both in free agency and the draft, or at the very least the draft within the first 2 rounds. But if we do end up going corner in the first round, then maybe you have the leeway to let go of Kendall Fuller. But again, the draft is after free agency, so you would have to cut Kendall Fuller before the draft for this to make sense. And then you have to know going into the draft, first round, we're taking corner no matter what. But you never know. There may be a run on corners, and then you're left with nobody worthy of the 16th overall pick. Christian Gonzalez, Joey Porter, Devin Witherspoon, all of those guys are gone by then, and now you're in an ugly situation. So I don't think this is very likely, and again, I'm going to put everybody in order of how likely it is, but right now, we're just going down the list as far as who's taking up the most cap space this upcoming 2023 season. And Kendall Fuller, if you were to cut him, he's an $11.6 million cap space hit right now. You cut him, you save $8 million, a little over $8 million. He's only a $3 million dead cap hit. So that's really interesting. You can save $8 million from cutting Kendall Fuller, even though I don't think you will. Because even if you end up getting one of the top corners in the draft, Kendall Fuller is a great guy to have around him for him to learn and develop, especially with us losing Chris Harris. They're going to need to look to other guys for these guys to develop. And of course, having a veteran guy that still plays, that's still playing at a fairly high level, at least a good enough level at times, and on the field coach in a way, Kendall Fuller would basically be the elder statesman. And it's just crazy. It just seems like not too long ago, we just drafted this guy and he was coming onto the scene as an elite slot corner before we traded him to the Chiefs. It's amazing how time flies. But yeah, Kendall Fuller could be that guy that you keep, even if you do draft a Joey Porter, to help with the development of a Benjamin St-Juste and Joey Porter or Christian Gonzalez, Devin Witherspoon, either one of those guys. And then you also have Danny Johnson in there as a relatively young corner as well. So I doubt it happens, but out of his $8.6 million cap hit, you could take away about 8.5 of it and save $8.5 million, which is really interesting. Then next up, you have Logan Thomas, man, and he did not look good this last season. Now, granted, some of it was Taylor Heineke's fault, but the majority of it, for sure, was Logan Thomas. But also Juan Castillo, it just didn't seem like he got the most out of these guys this past season. I don't know what happened. Armani Rogers, love his talent, but it just seemed like we couldn't get the most out of him this past season. Still very raw, also got hurt for a while, but it just seemed like Cole Turner didn't make much of an improvement. John Bates pretty much stayed where he was. If anything, he may have regressed a little. So maybe it's not all Logan Thomas's fault. Maybe it's the quarterback play. Maybe it's the offensive coordinator. Maybe it's the tight ends coach, whoever. But either way, if you were to cut Logan Thomas, who's taking up almost $9 million worth of cap space right now, you would save a little over $5 million because he would only be a $3.5 million dead cap hit once you release him. So cut Logan Thomas, potentially save over $5 million worth of cap space, which could go to somebody else. Then next up, and who's taking up the most cap space, you have Bobby McCain. I mean, if Percy Butler balls out moving forward the way he looked in that last game against the Cowboys, along with Cameron Curl healthy, Derek Forrest he looks like an elite safety as long as Cameron Curl's on the field with him. When Cameron Curl isn't on the field, Derek Forrest looks lost. But with Cameron Curl on the field, I don't know what he's doing as far as helping that man during games. But it's a completely different player. And if Percy Butler can look how he looked against the Cowboys, and Derek Forrest looks how he looks with Cameron Curl out there with him, and Cameron Curl is healthy to be out there with him, you could argue that's an elite safety group right there. So you may not need a Bobby McCain, who is versatile, can play in the slot a little bit, can play some free safety. I don't like how much blame he gets for a lot of stuff that may not even necessarily be his fault as far as the secondary goes, but at the same time, he's taking up $5 million worth of cap space this upcoming season. If you cut him, you get to save $2.3 million of that with only a $2.8 million dead cap hit. And $2.3 million isn't a lot of savings, but if we're really penny pinching, that could be a guy that we end up cutting. Then you have Andrew Norwell, where I don't think he should be our starting left guard moving forward. Now, I feel like he wasn't necessarily as bad as Trey Turner, but I loved what I saw from Chris Paul against the Cowboys. And I felt like Chris Paul should have got his chance to start, just like Sam Howell, at the very least to show what they could do sooner in the season. Then he went out there and blocked the way he blocked against the Cowboys. He looks like he could potentially be our franchise left guard. So we no longer need Andrew Norwell. He's taking up $5 million worth of cap space this upcoming season. If you cut him, literally the same thing as Bobby McCain. $5 million worth of cap space right now. Cut him to save $2.2 million, around $2.3 million, and he'll be a $2.8 million dead cap against the cap this season. So that's another guy. You cut Bobby McCain, Andrew Norwell together, that's $5 million right there almost. And then after that, it's just not worth cutting anybody because, first of all, we're not going to cut Tress Way. And even if we did, we would only save $2 million worth of cap space. Cornelius Lucas is so cheap, only being a $3.7 million cap hit. You cut him, you save $2.8 million because he's only a $900,000 dead cap, but that's still very cheap. You might as well keep him. And then like J.D. McKissick, we're more than likely going to end up cutting him, and it has nothing to do with money, but you only save $1 million from cutting him. Antonio Gibson, you should keep him for the talent. Cameron Curl, you should keep him for the talent. Jay Smith-Williams, you cut him, you save almost $3 million. But, I mean, he was the guy that was starting at left end until Chase Young came back healthy. So, at the very least, you need to keep him as depth. And just all across the board, there's just no real savings after that. I mean, Benjamin St. Juste, you're not going to cut him for any reason. But you would save somewhere less than $1 million for cutting him. And it just gets sillier and sillier as you go down the list as far as how much money you would even save for cutting these guys. So, we're getting into the territory of it not being worth it at all. But as far as priorities, Carson Wentz is gone for sure, 100% sure. I mean, of course, if you've taken statistics, nothing is 100%, so you'll give it a 99.999% with the bell curve and all of that, but Carson Wentz is gone. I mean, an additional $26 million worth in cap space. Again, just cutting him alone, we have $33 million worth of cap space, and we go from 18th in the NFL to 7th or 8th, just depending on how petty the math gets between the Baltimore Ravens, who has $33,800,000. We'd probably go right behind them for 8th, but either way, we shoot from 18th to 8th at the very least in cap space rankings, just from cutting Carson Wentz, who's an obvious cut. He has to go. Only reason he hasn't been cut yet is because the new league year hasn't started, and he's technically uncuttable as of today. But when that free agency period starts in March, the day that it starts, Carson Wentz is up out of here for sure. Not trading him, not thinking about keeping him, nothing. Just like Kevin Garnett, burn it. No, don't throw it away. No, burn it. So Carson Wentz is gone. Then you have Logan Thomas and I would say Andrew Norwell, who are quite likely. Nowhere near as likely as Carson Wentz. I mean, it's a big gap. It's Carson Wentz for sure, big gap, and then we get to likelies. I don't think there's any like more than likely type of guys, like super duper likely. It's just Carson Wentz, who's 99.999% chance gone. Then you get the Logan Thomas and Andrew Norwell, who are probablys and quite likely. Again, for the reasons I've already explained, you cut Logan Thomas, you save a little over $5 million. You cut Andrew Norwell, you save a little over $2 million, which gives you about like $8 million worth of additional cap space. So after you cut Carson Wentz and Andrew Norwell and Logan Thomas, we get around like $42 million worth of cap space, which would put us 5th in the NFL in cap space. And then after that, it just gets less and less likely. Like Bobby McCain, again, for that petty $2.3 million, who's a guy that, you know, at the very least, he could be great depth and an on-the-field coach for like a Percy Butler who's learning, Derek Forrest who's learning, and at the very least, some type of depth if there's an injury or if Percy Butler isn't looking as good as we'd expect. Just like a little nice safety net that you know you can throw out there. He's not going to play at an elite level, but he's going to give you at least somewhat dependable safety play and maybe even slot corner if Danny Johnson for some reason looks terrible in the preseason again and we just doubt him all over again, even though he's shown every regular season that he's ready to step up and ball out. Doesn't matter how bad he looks in the preseason. But either way, I think Bobby McCain is less likely. So again, in review, Carson Wentz gone for sure. Logan Thomas, Andrew Norwell, probably, quite likely. And then I would say Bobby McCain is less likely. And then even less likely, I would say is Chase Roulier. Again, you would only save about $4 million. He's taking up $12 million worth of cap space. You cut him, he's still taking up $8 million. And he's not even playing for you on your team. And he is a top 5 center. His problem is that he can't stay healthy. I feel like you give him this last season. My plan would be give him this last season as your starting center. You have Tyler Larson as a backup. You re-sign Wes Schweitzer as a backup, hopefully for cheap. But also, you go heavy on center in this draft. Like, maybe even 3rd round, 4th round at the latest, to go ahead and get your potential replacement. Keith Ishmael didn't work out in the 5th round a few years ago. Try it again in the 4th or maybe even the 3rd. Or if there's like an elite guy for some reason available in the 2nd, maybe you go center in the 2nd. You go ahead and get Chase Roulier's replacement, and you start grooming that guy and developing that guy behind Chase Roulier. And if Chase Roulier ends up getting hurt, which is more likely to happen because that's just what keeps happening season after season, you have your potential starting center there behind him. But at the very least, go ahead and let Chase Roulier play this next season out. Because again, cutting him wouldn't even make sense. You're only going to save a little over $4 million. He's still taking up $8 million worth of dead cap. Not even playing for you. Playing for somebody else more than likely, which wouldn't even be worth it as far as a move goes. So that's very much less likely than Bobby McCain. And then the least likely, like I already said, Kendall Fuller. Now, granted, again, cutting Kendall Fuller would save you a little over $8 million worth of cap space, which does sound nice. And somewhere midway through the season, before Carson Wentz got hurt, like before the Bears game, and it looked like our season was going down the drain, I felt like cutting Kendall Fuller was obvious. But then the way he balled out and played very well a lot of the time, not all of the time, but a lot of the time, and getting pick sixes and things like that throughout the rest of the season, like I've already explained, he can be that on the field coach. He's not even that old, but he can still be somewhat of like that veteran presence to help develop the younger secondary players that we have, because Kendall Fuller can play safety as well, so he helps with the safety position and all of that as far as developing the young guys. He's not just only helping who we would potentially take in the upcoming draft, but he could also help like Percy Butler adapt to slot corner and free safety, just like Bobby McCain and things like that, or give Danny Johnson any additional pointers. Even help Cameron Curl in certain ways. Of course, Benjamin St-Juste as well. I mean, they were outside cornerback running mates. Benjamin St-Juste, cornerback 1, Kendall Fuller, cornerback 2. I'm pretty sure Kendall Fuller has a lot that he can still offer this team on the field and as an on-the-field coach. So even though you would save $8 million, I just don't see it. But again, when our season looked like it was going down the drain before we beat the Bears, and even kind of after we beat the Bears, because that was a really fluky win that we barely got away with, I was definitely in the boat of, I mean, I guess it's time to move on from Kendall Fuller and blow this whole thing up and get as much cap space as we can heading into the next offseason. But now with the way that he balled out of all of the potential cuts that we've talked about, Kendall Fuller would save you the most money, honestly. But I still think he's the least likely just because of how much he's performed, how dependable he's been. He doesn't miss games and things like that. That's what's different from him and Chase Roulier. Cutting Kendall Fuller would save you more money than cutting Chase Roulier. But I mean, how good can you be when you're not available? Your best ability is your availability, and Chase Roulier has not been that at all. Doesn't matter if he's a top 5 center when healthy. When is he healthy? So I think Kendall Fuller ends up staying, even though after Carson Wentz, he would save you the most money out of anybody we could potentially cut, but I still don't think it's worth it. So again, just to review, Carson Wentz gone for sure. Logan Thomas and Andrew Norwell quite likely. Bobby McCain less likely. Chase Roulier even less likely for this year. Next year, who knows? We'll see. And then Kendall Fuller, I think, is very, very unlikely. So if you cut all of those names, including Kendall Fuller for some reason, we would have $58 million worth of cap space, which would put us 3rd after the Cincinnati Bengals, right ahead of the Atlanta Falcons for the 3rd most cap space in the NFL, $58 million. You can go ahead and pay Deron Payne long term. Go ahead and lock up Cameron Curl, Cole Holcomb long term. You may want to go ahead and pay Montez Sweat with that money, and then you would still have some money left over to do what you got to do in free agency to get a really good offensive line around Sam Howell ready and all of that type of stuff. So I mean, we'll see. I mean, if you do all of that without cutting Kendall Fuller, we would still have almost $50 million worth of cap space, and I still think that's really good. So I'm down to go that route if that's what they choose to do. I mean, again, I think you may want to keep Bobby McCain since cutting him doesn't make that much sense anyway. And then again, don't cut Kendall Fuller. So I'm thinking realistic wise, and you'll probably keep Chase Roulier as well because it's just not worth that $4 million that you would get. So we'll probably have somewhere around $40 million worth of cap space to be completely realistic if we cut Carson Wentz, Logan Thomas, and Andrew Norwell. And I think at that point we can make something shake in free agency. I'm not gonna lie, I think we can do something with that. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Like I already said, I'm working on free agency videos, different ones like my top 5 favorite players and this available free agency at every position that we need. Of course, I still need to do a team needs video and rank them. Which one is the most important? Offensive line, corner, linebacker, in order, all of that type of stuff. Then I also want to do a dream case free agency scenario and then a more realistic, if I were Ron Rivera, type of free agency scenario. So be on the lookout because this is just step 1 into free agency. How we can get the most cap space possible, what's the most realistic amount that we may end up with like we covered today, and then from there we're going shopping. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that. And of course, man, I appreciate all the support, man. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. And of course, I appreciate all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose name you see scrolling on the screen right now. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.